very glad to have you in Bucharest. Thank you for coming. And we are indeed grateful because we have the benefit of a retrospective view of what happened in these 20 years after the fall of communism. And you just told us that you visited three brand new capitals for you. That is Sofia, Tirana and Bucharest.
And Budapest.
Not to mention Budapest, which is of course more closer to you. But my first question would be personal. How would you assess the transformations of these cities after 20 years?
Well, I haven't been to three of them before, so I have no basis for comparison. I haven't been before to Sofia, Tirana and Bucharest. But I would say that my assessment has been different in each place, and I was impressed in Tirana by the immense energy and construction activities, and the seeming prosperity.
The vitality.
Yes, and the huge number of cars. I knew Albania used to be the poorest country in Europe, and also in the communist days the most oppressed, most terrorized. So that was a surprise. I mean, aesthetically speaking, Tirana is not a great experience because it's a brand new city, and
with all its defects, of course. Yeah.
It's just the garbage is not collected very well, and traffic is anarchic, and you have a lot of these old socialist style buildings.
Yeah.
But it seems like the tentacles of capitalism reach deep into Albania, certainly.
What about Sofia?
Well, Sofia was quite different. It seemed to be a much more orderly city than Tirana. Also architecturally much more impressive. People seem to be driving with more restraint and discipline. And altogether it also made a good impression. There seemed to be less construction, less of this huge amount of commercial activity I have seen in Tirana, but in some way, from the aesthetic point of view, there was a positive factor. But I haven't had many conversations in Sofia, so the person who invited me to this conference, which we start this week on Thursday, he just met me at the airport, and we talked in the hotel, but I haven't had any
extensive conversations with Bulgarians, indeed. But I mean, it seems to me from what you're telling us is that somehow you, as a native Hungarian, feel, also knowing very well what happened in Hungary before and after the fall of communism, you feel that it was worth it somehow, fighting for this freedom, despite the great nostalgia which some people have for the stability, for the economic stability from the past now with the crisis. You feel it was worth it?
Well, yes, I would certainly say so. One more thing I forgot to mention, that in each case, Tirana, Sofia and Bucharest, I was impressed by the new airports, which is a kind of, I suppose, a symbol of reaching out. Openness. This is really important in this country. We have a good link with the rest of the world.
I think we can move on, and now we can talk more about the purpose of your trip to Bucharest, which is to deliver a paper about the temptation of communism among Western intellectuals, which seems to be not only a temptation of the past, like in the 30s with Whittaker Chambers and Alger Hiss, but rather even a recent temptation which some Hollywood, not so much intellectuals, but nonetheless stars, have for people like Chavez and so on. So what would you sort of tell us in a nutshell about this, the sources of this temptation, the origins, the roots, psychological and social first, maybe?
Well, as you know, I have given much thought to this matter, and much of my professional career was devoted to this one way or the other. And on the one hand, you might say that intellectuals or Western intellectuals are the kind of people who, for whatever reason, gravitate to this social role of the social critic. I mean, that's the beginning. First they reject their own society, and then they look around for alternatives. And you could say that as individuals, intellectuals seem to be motivated by some sort of discontent, high expectations, idealism.
Wolf Leibniz spoke about die klagende Klasse, the complaining class.
Who said that?
Wolf Leibniz, the German,
Yes.
the German sociologist.
Yes.
I think it's a very good phrase.
It's a very good phrase, the complaining class.
The ever-complaining, basically, class, searching for a more utopian sort of ideal.
And what I have been wondering, how do people get recruited to this group? I mean, is it really some kind of a personal disposition to begin with? Or what exactly it is? Certainly, it is easy to specify what these complaining intellectuals have in common. I think they have in common a discontent with the world they live in, which doesn't provide them automatically with a meaning in life and with a sense of community. And I think this is another way of saying that intellectuals, even Western intellectuals, are not happy with modernity, basically, or certain aspects of modernity.
Yeah, though they've built it somehow.
Yes.
On themselves.
And also that they are not happy with living in a secular society, although originally they were the pioneers of secularization. So they are consumed by these diffuse discontents. And
they want to abort what they produce themselves somehow. They want to kill the baby which they produced themselves centuries ago.
Well, we could also say that as most human beings, but more so, they are also consumed by conflicting desires and values. For instance, as I wrote about this, they are both elitists and egalitarians. They are both individualists and communitarians.
Or populists.
Yeah, this kind of thing. So,
but why communism, really? I mean, the question is, in the face of such a tremendous evidence, we've got more than 100. You've contributed greatly to this debate in America. More than 100 million people killed by communist states. How can you possibly still think?
Well, what most Western intellectuals have been doing or saying since the collapse of Soviet communism, they have been saying that at last Marxism doesn't have to bear this burden of being associated with this bad system.
Doesn't have to bend its...
It doesn't have to bear the burden
of
being associated with this bad system. So now we can go to Marxism and really use it to better understand the world we live in. That kind of argument.
So it's the return to the origins, the myth of...
Yeah, they insist, as you know, that Marxism had nothing to do with the failures of communist systems. That has been a major claim of most of these intellectuals, that Marxism had nothing to do with it. Now, my point has always been that we can debate how much Marxism had to do with it, but it had to do with it. And so some aspects are very obvious. For instance, all communist systems agreed with Marx and with one another that it was a good thing to nationalize the means of production, and they did so, and it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah, centralized economy.
Right.
The abolition of property.
Right. So that all comes from Marx. Yes, Marx didn't advocate the setting up of the Gulag. No, he didn't. Or one-party systems that he didn't advocate, sure. So there was a connection with Marxism.
But why start again? This is the great fear I have.
You see, I don't know exactly if they start again.